Well, in our continuing series of Vancouver sports media legends, we find ourselves with a gentleman who covered sports for the Vancouver Sun from 1997 through 2005. Just enough time to bury the Grizzlies and nearly bury the Messier-era Canucks, and has dabbled in sports columns with the Globe and Mail since, where he was my colleague once upon a time. It is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Gary Mason to the show. How you doing, my friend? Good to see you. Good to hear your voice
Well, it's
again.
great to be here, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Do you know where you were 12 years ago today, Gary? Because I sure do.
12 years ago today. Okay, where are we here? May.
May 22nd, 2011.
Was this the seventh game of the? No, this was in the Stanley Cup riot day, was it?
No, that's June.
That's June. Okay.
Yeah.
No, tell me.
You and I were in the back of a Lincoln Town Car, speeding away from the HB Pavilion in San Jose after Sammy Salo and the Canucks had just bludgeoned the Sharks on their power play to take a 3-1 series lead in the Western Conference Final. And Gary, I'll never forget this as long as I live, because we looked at each other for a moment and went, holy F, we're going to cover a Canucks Stanley Cup championship.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I
my
do
man?
now. Yeah. God, I just get chills thinking about that. Like that was quite a moment, actually. Yeah. The other
Merely a 40-year drought at that point. Merely a 40-year drought, and you thought maybe, just maybe, it was coming to an end.
Yeah. No, I mean, the other great thing about that, the San Jose experience, actually, I went to see between games down there. I went to see Prince at the
Right.
he was playing at the arena in between games, and I nabbed a seat, and oh God, that was just an absolutely amazing concert. So yeah, it was a great trip all in all.
I think that was the absolute height of my confidence in the Canucks. Even after a 2-0 series lead against Boston in the next series, which again, I was pretty convinced they were going to win, but I'm just watching them destroy a really good San Jose team here in that Western Conference.
They seemed
final.
like an eventuality. They seemed like, like they were just going to do it. And of course, we know how that worked out for them. So, I mean, you covered a lot of big moments for this team. Can you think of a obviously they didn't go farther than that, than the Stanley Cup final, but were there other big moments that rival that one in covering the Canucks over the years?
Well, I mean, there were so many. I mean, there weren't many moments that sort of kind of joyous as that, as
joyous,
that I mean, there were lots of moments and many
newsworthy moments.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Like there were many dark moments, that I associate with the time covering the team. Brashear getting hit by McSorley. The Bertuzzi incident. Assault. I mean, there's just the team. It was really like a sports columnist's dream to cover the team during the era that I did, because I mean, it was just like so jam packed with news and I mean, the whole Messier thing was such a debacle. I remember going to Tokyo, where the whole transfer of the captaincy went down. It was just like, it was so surreal. There were so many surreal aspects of covering the Canucks. It's a funny story. One of my favorite stories is, during the early days covering the team, that was when, John McCaw had come in to, take over the Canucks, and he didn't know anything about hockey. And the guys he put in charge knew nothing about hockey. And one of the guys was that he installed early on as club president was a fellow by the name of John Chappell. And John Chappell was a really nice guy that came from the business world, didn't know anything about hockey, but he was just a really nice guy. And during that period, Pat Quinn was the coach and general manager, and maybe Rick Lee was the coach. I can't remember, but I think Quinn was in charge in any event. And Marty Jelena was on the team, and Marty Jelena was really playing well, and he was like a team leader, and I was kind of new to the whole thing. So this is 98 now, I guess. And Marty was playing on this really horrible contract that he had signed. And I thought it was really unfair that this guy was, being, jerked around by this. And so I wrote like about 3 or 4, like just pro Marty Jelena columns. I just like, give Marty his money. Like Pat Quinn was like, no, he signed this contract. That's just the way it goes. And I've gone, no, this is unfair. This guy, you're going to lose this guy. And I was very passionate about it. So one night I'm sitting at home and the phone rings and it's John Chappell, the president of, Orca Bay. And, he goes, Gary, like, I really want to talk to you about these columns you've been writing on Marty Jelena. And can you tell me more about it? Like, why do you feel so passionate about it? So, I was telling him why I thought, it was really important for the team to respect, a player, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so they go ahead and they force Quinn to rip up the contract and give Marty a new contract. And it was just unbelievable. Like, I remember getting off the phone and my wife said, like, who was that? I said, it's John Chappell, the president of the Canucks. He wanted to know all about it. And anyway, and Pat Quinn was so pissed off about this whole thing, but he was kind of had this decision jammed down his throat by Orca Bay. And Marty and I like laughed about it for years after, about how I got him all these millions of dollars and things like that. And it was quite funny. But I mean, that's how different things were back in the early days covering the Canucks.
No, Gary, we have a very similar problem right now. They call us all the time asking us for our opinions and what they should do next. It's just the same.
And we tell them there's a lot of contracts they should rip up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Did you lance much with the big Irishman? Because Pat could have his days.
Yeah, he and I actually had a very good relationship once we got over that. I remember, I think the very first column I did, when I took over the column, I went and interviewed Pat Quinn in his office, and it was like McGillney was there. I mean, they had a decent team. Anyway, it was I can't even remember what it was about, but he was the very first interview I did, and and we had a really good relationship. I mean, he hated Tony Gallagher, so I mean, I kind of drafted off of that situation a bit,
right.
And thought, okay, well, I can be the good cop, and so no, I mean, that was he was an Irishman I got along with mostly. And then the other Irishman came in, and we had our moments. Boy, I'll tell you, Brian Burke and we had some absolute knockdown, drag out fights. I'll never forget one that we had in the bowels of GM Place, as it was then. And I wrote something that made him furious, and he hauled me into his office, and he was screaming at me and I was screaming at him. Like it was a full on screaming match, but I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to be intimidated by him. And I just gave it back to him and people, the guys and the reporters could hear it in the hallway. It was really loud. And so he and I had some real doozies. That's for sure.
There's a beauty in that though, in that at least you're dealing with it.
Yeah.
Like today it's just so, well, we'll just cut off then. And access is an issue and all that sort of stuff.
Or we'll get the media relations guy to go and scream at you, and it never gets sort of resolved.
And there's
face to face, man, pro to pro.
And Tony, to his defense, has always said this too, that they would, if I wrote something that they didn't like, well, they would address me with that issue rather than all this circumventing that we see now.
Yeah. I kind of equated it to like a hockey fight, at training camp. I remember going to training camps in the interior, and these guys, were fighting for positions, and I remember, do you remember a player for the Canucks, Harold Druken? He was from the Maritimes. And then there was another guy who was a high draft pick, Josh. I can't remember what his. Yeah, Josh Holden. And so they had a fight in training camp that was like went on for 2 minutes. That's when they allowed fights in training camp. And it was like, holy shit, they were just throwing haymakers, just going at it. And then after their morning session, I see the two of them walking to go have lunch. It was like nothing had happened. It was like such a classic, hockey fight. And every time Berkey and I got at it, I kind of viewed it like that, like we're, after it's over, we're still going to have to deal with one another. And, it's like
Right.
the cloud had burst, and at least that stuff was done with, and we could move on. We both, but, I think that the most important thing with dealing with Berkey was, he was kind of a classic bully. And, you'd really, it's a truism, but it's absolutely true, is you do have to stand up to them and, to get any kind of respect from them. And so, yeah, so Berkey was, he was fun to cover.
Yeah, no, I yearn for those days. I dealt with a lot of those guys. So over my time covering sports, and if you could air it out and move on the next day, then everybody was the better for it. What do you make of the state of the Canucks these days, Gary?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I sort of you despair on the one hand, and but on the other hand, you look at what's happened to the hockey this year, and like who's in the Final Four. Like they're just like good, solid teams. Like they're not teams filled with superstars. And it's not like, I think it's sort of, I've sort of followed the Kraken quite a bit this year. I've just been intrigued by the team, and I have an association with Todd Lewicki, and I look at how that team was built, and then I look at the Canucks, and I'm thinking like I don't know. Like, I don't know if you guys are rip it down, start over guys. I don't think I subscribe to that now. I think that this year's hockey demonstrates that, the Canucks have some really great pieces. They have some really horrible pieces that are these huge albatrosses, that are dragging the team down. And I mean, it's no secret. There's no really easy way out of some of those contracts. It's but that's kind of the frustrating part about the Canucks, is that, you can see that there's some elements there, like, they've got a really great goalie, I think. And, the pieces up front that are really solid. I don't really think it would take that much to turn the Canucks into a really solid, playoff bound team. I really don't. I don't believe that you have to rip this thing down to the core and start over again.
Well, in terms of number of bodies, I think you're probably right. We're not talking about turning over 12 guys here, but those albatross contracts, unlike the non-cap era that you covered, it's just not. It's easier said than done, right? You take away a couple of contracts on the Canucks, and it's eminently doable getting back to respectability, but you just can't. Yeah,
no, that's it. I mean, that's the problem. I think that, Aquilini, he comes under a lot of criticism, and much of it, is justified. But I think the biggest mistake that Francesco has made during his time as the owner was with Benning. And I think, he and I have had conversations about this over lunch, and he totally agrees. He left Benning in that position far too long. And that's come back to bite him in the ass in a really big way now. I mean, I think, Benning made some good choices, but he made some absolutely horrible, horrible choices. And the Canucks are living with his mistakes, and they will be for, who knows how many more years. But it's too bad, because, you just, I don't know. You guys are much closer to it than I am, but I don't know, like, how many more years are we looking at before they can escape some of these mistakes? Is it so far down the road, then it does make sense to start over? I just seems like, I don't know. It just seems like that would be such a waste of the talent that they have. Guys like Pettersson don't come around very often. I mean, he's a legitimate, superstar in the making. I mean, if he's not already, and Hughes is a great player. I mean, they've got guys that are really, really good hockey players, and they've got the foundation of a really good team. It's just, how do you escape the mistakes? And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
Hey, Gary, you're kind of like the Francesco whisperer in the market. Like, why did he leave Benning in as long as he did? Has he ever told you that? Has he ever given an explanation why Benning was still in the job long after much of the hockey world realized he was in over his head?
No, it just seemed like Benning was always able to persuade Francesco that, they were one big move away from, this team becoming something. And I think that the biggest thing that surprised me is, when he passed on to Chuck in that year's draft, who did they take ahead? Was the
Levy.
Francesco, that probably still eats Francesco up to this day. He was absolutely livid about that they missed that mark so badly. And yet, even after that, he left Benning in that position, for at least 2 more years or something like that. And I don't know. I suppose every team has got one of those stories about, the guy that they passed up for some guy who became a chump. But I don't know. That's the biggest mystery to me. I think, Francesco, I do know that he wants a Stanley Cup, and I do know that he spent a lot of money, some of it wisely, some of it very unwisely. But the Benning thing is the biggest mistake he's made so far with this franchise, in my opinion.
There's an earnestness to Jim Benning, which not that Aquilini is necessarily succumbs to these emotions and that sort of thing, but there is an earnestness to Jim Benning when he speaks that you want to believe what he's saying, even though there was no track record to believe it.
Thoroughly decent.
We
had a lot of issues with what Benning did and managed with the Canucks. I don't have a single bad word to say about Jim Benning.
No, and I think the other thing that's sort of an X factor in this is, I do know that Jim had a very good relationship with Luigi Aquilini. Luigi loved him, and so that may have been a reason why they kept him around a little bit longer than they perhaps should have.
Do you know how much say Luigi has to this day? I know he's quite a man.
I don't think he has much anymore. I think Francesco pretty much runs the show now, and I think for the very first time, I think they have a guy in charge in Rutherford who is truly running the show. I mean, I think I do know that Francesco has so much respect for him that he wouldn't dare, try to be intrusive in any way in terms of hockey decisions, in a way that he might have been in the past in terms of sitting in on, draft meetings and, things like that. I think he has so much respect for Rutherford that he's hands off and he's letting Rutherford run the show, and whatever Rutherford decides is going to be the way they go.
So you don't think it's daily calls from the owner's office?
Absolutely not. I just, Rutherford would never tolerate that. The guy is,
you wouldn't think
he would never tolerate that. So, and I think, Francesco knows that he's got somebody who's really well respected around the league and got experience. I mean, he's never had somebody like that in the position, really. I mean, you could argue Berkey had, he had a pretty good reputation for making some good trades and stuff, but Rutherford's a different animal altogether. He's in a different league than other people.
Hey, answer me this, Gary. We're talking about those albatross contracts, and of course, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is the one that sticks out. They owe him $29 million over the next 4 years. Right. Buying him out means you're paying him nearly $20 million not to play, but it's still $9 million less than what you would otherwise be paying him. And look, there's an initial huge cap savings of $7+ million for next year. It gets worse as the buyout moves on, of course, and you're ultimately eating a $2.4 million dead cap charge for 4 years. Do you think the Aquilinis would buy out that contract? Do you think that's something they would legitimately look at? Because as Blake and I have been talking about, that is the magic bullet. I'm not sure the trade market is the magic bullet to creating cap space and sort of allowing you to build around Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko. But Ekman-Larsson and an immediate $7 million savings, that would be. Do you think that's something ownership would do or consider?
I don't think that they would do it at this point. Matt, I just don't. I think they want to give these coaches a chance with him, next year and see what Adam Foote and Gonchar, see if they can salvage him in some way, bring him back, get him in the most, unreal state of fitness that he's ever been in. And, even if he was a dependable third pairing guy, I mean, at least it's something, I mean, so I don't know. I don't think that they would be prepared to do that just yet. I mean, that's a pretty big ask, and I don't think I don't think it would be fair. I'm not defending Aquilini at all, but I don't think it would be fair to say, oh well, this guy doesn't want to win if he's not prepared to eat all those millions. I think that Francesco would talk to Rutherford and talk at those guys and say, what do you think? Is the guy salvageable? Do you think? And I think that they'd want a chance with him. He's a decent, really decent human being, and I think Ekman Larsson, I mean, and I think he feels horrible, about the situation, and horrible that he's become this out. Nobody, no player with any self-respect, and he has a lot of it, would wants to be that player. I mean, you feel absolutely shitty. So, so I don't know. I think personally, I mean, without knowing, just my sense is that it's too early to do that. They're not having those conversations yet.
Final question on this storyline for me. The Lions have got stable ownership right now. Mardoma's done a great job there. Whitecaps have had long-time ownership, and they're clawing away trying to grab a piece of the market. But anytime there's been any sort of scuffling from either one of those teams, people have wondered if Francesco Aquilini would consider expanding the empire in any way, shape, or form. Again, it's not imminent. He's probably not hunting them down because of the stability that's currently there for those two teams. But do you think there's a day in which he owns more than one pro sports franchise in the city?
I don't. I think he kicked the tires on the Lions at one time and came away convinced that wasn't, for him.
Wise.
So I really...
Hey, tried to get in on the Whitecaps MLS deal at one point too, but that was many, many moons ago. That's 15 plus years ago.
Yeah. No, Blake, I really don't think, in any conversation I've had about it, with him about that, he originally hadn't expressed much interest, except for some interest he expressed a long time ago. And his people, as they say, sniffed around, saw what was there, and decided it wasn't for them. So I really don't think that he's going down that road.
My friend, we're out of time, but it's great hearing your voice and asking you questions and having the discussion with you again. I hope your golf game's in good shape. We got to take you up to Northlands here when you can make the drive over and come see us.
Absolutely. It's been a blast. I've really enjoyed this, and it's great, talking about the state of the team today and going down memory road a bit. There's just stories are just endless when it comes to Vancouver sports.
You're an important voice, important pen in this market, have been for a long time, Gary. So thank you for the time here. Appreciate it. We'll catch up soon.
Okay, thanks, guys.